Some people do not stay home because they love silence. They stay home because the world started feeling emotionally expensive. Every conversation drains them a little. Every invitation feels like another performance they must survive. And slowly, without noticing, they begin choosing absence instead of friction. At first it feels healthy. You rest more. You avoid unnecessary noise. You protect your energy. But there is a dangerous line almost nobody sees while it is happening. The line where peace quietly becomes emotional avoidance. The line where comfort stops healing you and starts hiding you. And the strange part is that it rarely feels dramatic. It feels reasonable. That is why so many intelligent and emotionally aware people slowly disappear from life without realizing they are disappearing at all. If this feeling sounds familiar, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because these videos are made for people who think deeply but rarely feel understood. Leave a like if you have ever needed distance from the world just to breathe again. And comment whether you have ever canceled plans, stayed home, and secretly felt relieved the moment nobody expected anything from you anymore. Share this video with someone who carries too much emotional weight in silence. Sometimes, the people who seem calm on the outside are simply exhausted from pretending they are okay all the time. And hearing that they are not alone can change more than you imagine. The human mind adapts quickly. That is the problem. The moment your room becomes the only place where you feel emotionally safe, your brain starts treating the outside world like a threat. Not a physical threat, an emotional one. Crowds become exhausting. Messages become pressure. Social interaction starts feeling less like connection and more like maintenance. And eventually you stop asking yourself whether isolation is helping you grow or simply helping you avoid discomfort. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious begins controlling our behavior from the shadows. And many people who isolate themselves are not choosing solitude consciously. They are responding automatically to emotional wounds they never fully faced. The home becomes more than a home. It becomes a controlled environment where nothing unpredictable can hurt them anymore. The problem is that emotional safety and emotional growth are rarely found in the same place. Growth requires uncertainty. It requires misunderstanding, vulnerability, awkwardness, rejection, and exposure. But when somebody spends too much time protecting themselves from discomfort, they slowly stop developing emotional resilience. Life becomes smaller. Their routines become narrower. Their emotional tolerance becomes weaker. And because the isolation feels peaceful, they rarely question it. Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we refuse to confront do not disappear. They wait. They accumulate quietly underneath daily habits. So sometimes the reason you feel emotionally tired around people is not because people are bad for you. Sometimes it is because you have spent too long disconnected from spontaneity, challenge, and emotional risk. The soul weakens when life becomes too controlled. And here is what makes this cycle dangerous. Isolation often disguises itself as self-awareness. You tell yourself you are selective, that you protect your peace, that shallow interactions no longer interest you. And sometimes that is true. But emotional avoidance is intelligent. It knows how to speak in mature language. It knows how to disguise fear as wisdom. Slowly you stop participating in life, but you still convince yourself you are evolving. Meanwhile, your world becomes repetitive, predictable, emotionally flat. You feel safe, but less alive. Jung believed the psyche needs movement between the inner and outer world. Reflection matters. Solitude matters. But when someone lives only inside themselves, eventually their thoughts stop expanding. They begin circling the same emotions, the same fears, the same interpretations until loneliness starts sounding like identity. There is also another truth people rarely admit. Staying home can become addictive because inside your own space, you control how you are perceived. Nobody interrupts your image of yourself. Nobody challenges your routines. Nobody exposes your insecurities unexpectedly. In isolation, identity feels stable. But real life forces adaptation. It forces you to confront contradictions inside yourself. That is why some people feel strangely irritated after social interaction, even when nothing bad happened. The interaction disturbed the emotional structure they carefully built in private. Jung believed individuation happens when we integrate all parts of ourselves, not when we hide inside the comfortable ones. And sometimes the version of yourself you protect so carefully at home is incomplete. Sometimes the parts you still need to discover only appear through contact, friction, and unpredictability with other people. Eventually, something subtle begins happening. You stop feeling connected to time itself. Days blur together. Motivation becomes inconsistent. Small tasks feel heavier than before. You tell yourself you are resting, but the rest never fully restores you anymore. That happens because the human mind was not designed only for protection. It was designed for engagement. Meaning emerges through movement, relationships, effort, challenge, and emotional participation. Without those things, the psyche slowly loses vitality. Jung wrote often about psychic energy, the life force behind emotion, curiosity, creativity, and purpose. When somebody isolates too deeply for too long, that energy begins collapsing inward. The result is not peace, it is emotional stagnation. And emotional stagnation is dangerous because it feels calm while slowly disconnecting you from your own sense of aliveness. But this does not mean forcing yourself into noise, crowds, or artificial social performance. That is another mistake people make. Healing is not becoming louder. Growth is not pretending to enjoy environments that genuinely drain you. The real question is different. Are you choosing solitude consciously, or are you using it to escape emotional exposure? Those are completely different experiences. Conscious solitude expands you. Defensive isolation shrinks you. One reconnects you with yourself. The other disconnects you from life. And the difference is visible afterward. Healthy solitude leaves you clearer, calmer, more emotionally available. Defensive isolation leaves you emotionally numb, disconnected, and increasingly afraid of interaction. That is why some people feel anxious, even answering simple messages after isolating for too long. The outside world slowly stops feeling familiar to their nervous system. One of the most dangerous moments happens when somebody begins romanticizing their emotional disappearance. They start believing they no longer need people at all. They call everyone superficial. They convince themselves nobody understands them anyway. But Jung believed isolation becomes destructive when it cuts us off from psychological mirrors. Other people reveal parts of us we cannot see alone. Relationships expose hidden fears, expectations, insecurities, patterns, and emotional blind spots. Without those reflections, self-perception becomes distorted. You may believe you know yourself deeply while actually living inside emotional repetition. And this is why many isolated people secretly feel empty even when surrounded by comfort. The soul does not only need protection, it also needs exchange. It needs unpredictability. It needs moments that interrupt emotional paralysis and remind you that you are still fully alive. The strange thing is that the solution usually begins very small. Not with dramatic transformation. Not with becoming extremely social overnight. Sometimes healing begins by tolerating a little more emotional openness than yesterday. Answering the message instead of avoiding it. Going outside without emotionally preparing for hours. Allowing yourself to be seen imperfectly instead of disappearing until you feel emotionally organized again. Real growth often feels uncomfortable, precisely because it breaks psychological patterns that once protected you. Jung believed transformation begins when we stop identifying completely with our defenses. And many people who stay home constantly are not lazy, broken, or antisocial. They are overprotected. Their nervous system learned to associate visibility with exhaustion. But life returns slowly when you stop treating every emotional risk like danger. Maybe that is the deeper truth. The goal was never to abandon your inner world. Your sensitivity is not the problem. Your need for silence is not the problem. The problem begins when your safe space slowly becomes the only version of life you can tolerate. Because a meaningful life requires balance between retreat and participation, between reflection and experience, between protection and openness. You do not need to become someone louder, faster, or more socially impressive. But you do need to remain emotionally connected to life itself, to movement, to uncertainty, to people, to possibility. The healthiest inner world is not the one completely closed from reality. It is the one strong enough to stay open without collapsing. And that kind of strength is built gradually through conscious emotional participation in the world again. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Leave a like. Comment if you have ever gone through something like this. See you in the next video.